Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting on March 11th, 2025. Call to order, roll call, Vice Chair Anthony Maddox Jr.
Here.
Member Jim Posh.
Here.
Chair Gail Larson. We also have at the table Mayor Sarin. We have council members, Councilor Petrus, Councilor Cobb, President Kuda, and Director Hairston from Finance Department, Director Feltz from Finance Department, and Addie Ballister sitting back in the back. She is here with us. First of all, I would like to say thank you to everyone at this table. We've all worked hard on this to get to this point, and I'm encouraged that I think we can put it together this evening and do something special for the city to move it forward. So those are my words of encouragement, and I'm giving the floor right away to Mayor Sarin for 10 minutes.
All right, so I've got 10 minutes for comments, and I'm going to dispense with that so that we can just get on with it. I don't have any need
You don't have nothing new to share with us?
I think everything is pretty much there. All of the tables are on the website for anybody to see. We are, I think, trying to wind this down. I don't have any additional comments to make.
Okay. And did the fourth quarter 2024 go up on the website yet?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Councilor Posh?
Were there any changes to the website in the last week?
No.
All right, I'm fine with that. So Frank Ike, go ahead.
Yeah. First off, I'd like to thank everybody in this room. As Gail had stated, I know everybody's put in a lot of work, time reviewing materials throughout this process. And I know that I was a late newcomer to it, so thanks for accepting me and answering questions where I've had them and directing me to where I can get answers for some of my questions. So just wanted to open up, kind of giving a status update of some of my questions that I've posed throughout this process. I actually met with Director Hairston and Mr. Feltz last week to go over some areas for concern. Some of those, not concerns, the wrong word, questions that I had, just things that I wasn't sure how they worked or why they were what they were. So to give an update on kind of where that stands. So a couple of things I had questions on were transfers around year end, trying to understand better what caused those, why we had those for the city. So basically, through the process of trying to wrap up 2024, as many are aware, city was trying to catch up multiple months. So in December, at the time of where they stood, there was concern that certain funds were going to have potentially negative fund balances. So came to council, asked for the approval to be able to transfer money in those funds where they thought that was a possibility. So ultimately, that's what the transfers were around year end. Some of those funds you'll notice may have a positive fund balance, but basically at the time of the request, there was concern that there could be negative fund balances there. So that was the purpose of that. Also, in my analysis, I noticed some significant variances in the police and fire pension that I just wanted to understand better. Came to understand that ARPA funding and some COVID money had funded some of those payments in prior years. So you'll see some big fluctuations there between the budget going into 2025 versus 2024 and 2023. So basically just kind of a situation where using some of the intergovernmental grant dollars to fund those payments in prior years. So another area where I had looked into was some of the budget changes that were made near year end by the administration. So we researched last week, kind of just trying to understand a little bit about the workers' comp. One of the things in the budget document, there's a pretty big dip in the expenses of that in 2024, but it's coming back up to be a significant expense in 2025. We did not figure out yet exactly what's causing that. It could be a timing thing. Did you figure it out? Okay. So Mr. Feltz was looking into that. So it looks like he has figured that out. So that's something that I'll probably talk with him either after this meeting or just to kind of understand that a little bit better. Another item of area that I wanted to look into was the hospitalization changes. So one of the things we saw was in the original budget, pretty significant hospitalization charges. There were some adjustments right before year end in the appropriations for the hospitalization. So kind of looking at that, the city used a trend analysis, just kind of factoring in what hospitalization charges have been for the past couple of years to try and figure out what the expense should be. The one caveat I will make note about the hospitalization is it is a very difficult number to identify as they're self-insured. So in that case, claims can be all over the place from one year to the next. Working with various clients in different industries, a lot of places will have variances of as high as 15-20% from one year to another. It's hard to predict that. So, as far as where they ended up for the 2025 budget, it's based on a trend analysis of what they've seen. Now, one question I have that maybe we need to look into is just if any consideration was given to the vacancies that the city had in 2024, and if they're filled in 2025, what could that ultimately do to the hospitalization? But and then the other thing I looked into, I had questions on that I got an answer to was the fire admin overtime. It had decreased pretty significantly going into 2025, which just surprised me. Deficit in staffing in 24, plan to fill those positions. If they can fill those positions, we'll have less overtime. So a couple of other items that I still have open. So on the bank reconciliations, one of the things that I'd identified was with the bank reports changing in the cash position, I wanted to find out if the bank reconciliation had been updated. As of last Thursday, it had not, but it was something that was going to be worked on and looked at. So I'm waiting to get back the updated bank rec, which will hopefully then reconcile the difference between the cash balance and the bank reconciliation. And the final thing that I don't believe I've seen, and if anybody has, they can correct me, but I still haven't seen anything that reconciles the department budgets that we've received to the appropriations ordinance. So, and just understanding the purpose of that really is to understand how the appropriations ordinance is made up when looking at the department budgets, because that's really what we've talked about in most of these meetings. So just understanding how that reconciles back to that appropriations ordinance. But the other side of that is to understand the funding of it. So where are some of these expenditures being funded? If they're in a general fund, that's one thing, but if it's in a special revenue fund, just understanding where that funding comes from, I think is important when you're doing budgeting. To know, if it's a grant, you're not going to really make cuts in a grant area because it's being funded by an external source. Whereas if it's being funded by general fund dollars and you have to make cuts, that might be an area where you have to explore. So just something that I noticed. One other thing that I looked into, I haven't received a response yet, budgeted transfers. So for the last 3 years, we've had pretty significant transfers in the city. So I don't see much budgeted for transfers in 2025. And so my one question is, are there any recurring transfers that we would expect that we should be budgeting for up front so that we don't have any surprises at the end where council's being asked to approve a significant transfer out of the general fund, since that is the main fund that is going to cover any deficits in any of those special revenue funds for 2025. And I think that's the critical thing to understand. These special revenue funds usually have a specific funding source. The general fund is your area where you've got some, I don't want to say it's play money, but the money that you can choose how you want to spend it. You look at the streets construction fund, it has to be used on roads, maintenance, that type of thing. Indigent DUI treatment, it has to be used in specific, for specific purposes. So understanding that I think is important. So where I want to conclude in two things. I want to talk a little bit about where I see the budget and my thoughts on it. Ultimately, I don't believe that the budget presented puts the city at risk financially for 2025. I don't think there's an issue where you're going to be short on cash going into 2026 if the budget is approved exactly how it is. But what I want to say is, with the information just coming from so many different places, it has been difficult to follow. So I was trying to use the mayor's budget books, and I understand the budget book was prepared back, many months ago, trying to compare it, because it had a lot of detail just on kind of what the purpose and why certain things are happening, trying to compare that to the most recent department budgets, things weren't matching up. So it just made it challenging to reconcile some of the numbers. To give a specific example, and this is just one. So, but like the Muni Court budget and the budgeted appropriations worksheet shows expenses of 1.985 million. The budget day handout shows 1.8 million. And the difference isn't just capital, there's personnel, there's other than personnel items that change. So, not a significant change. There's just one variance I had identified. There's others there too. So just understanding kind of what those fluctuations are. Additionally, actual 24 expenses were 1.3 million. The 24 budget was 2.08 million. Kind of what caused that fluctuation, because we're back to budgeting at full amount. Now it could be lack of personnel, that type of thing. But one other thing that just because we've had delayed information, we really haven't talked as a group here where everybody stands on the budget. Capital, like we had the meetings with each department on the capital, but there's been no discussion here around this table about where everyone sits on capital. Are there things that people are like, we have to have this? Or are there things that people are like, do we need this year? We really haven't had those discussions. Same with personnel. Personnel and staffing is a big item to consider, because ultimately, if you're buying a vehicle, you're going to outlay, you buy a truck, we're going to outlay $50,000 for that truck. That cost is then gone. If you hire someone for $75,000, with benefits, well, guess what? That $75,000 now becomes $85,000 next year. It's $95,000 the year after that. So considering how those costs impact a future budget is something that should be given consideration as we are considering adding staffing, and it really hasn't been something that's been brought up to this point. So, one of the things that, in considering whether I think there's concerns with the budget, I know there were unfilled positions in 24. I would guess there's going to be unfilled positions in 24. There is not an organization that's ever run that is fully staffed. Everyone is always looking for people. So ultimately, the budget's probably prepared based on full staffing. There's going to be open positions that's going to result in some relief there. One other thing I just wanted to bring up, changing information. So, we received a fund summary report in February and a fund summary report in March that looked at 2024 and 2025, just to give us an idea of where things stand. And as of March, we're budgeting through 2025 comfortably to still have $65 million in fund balance. Very comfortable fund balance. One thing I want to bring up is in March, the 2024 projected fund balance was $85 million. February it was $85 million. By March, it becomes $70 million going into 25. So just the numbers changing made it challenging to be able to see the whole picture. So that leads me to my final points, thoughts on the future. So I think it's imperative to get caught up on financial reporting. I think everyone in this room agrees. I think the administration agrees, and I think that's why they've ultimately made the moves they have. To bring in Mr. Phelps to help, to bring in Mr. Hairston to lead the department. One of the things that I would just say on top of that, I would consider hiring an assistant finance director permanently when it's time to kind of make those decisions. I don't know what the ultimate the plan is in the finance department, but the city is big enough and has enough activity going on that to have a finance director and assistant finance director be there, you have more than enough going on here to be able to explain that that's a quality hire and a good use of resources. Another thing just to bring up, working with Mr. Harrison and Mr. Phelps last Thursday, one of two things I think needs to happen. Either some more training on the system, if that's ultimately the system the city's going to choose to move forward with. Otherwise, look at a new system. So one of those two things has to happen, because right now the reports are very robust, which in theory would be great. The problem is, the 4 pillars of financial reporting: relevance, reliability, comparability, understandability. You get a 75, 85, 180, 250 page report. It's very hard to look at it clearly, concisely, be able to make decisions on that. So trying to find a reporting system, accounting system that would allow you to get information in a concise manner that this group can look at in 20 minutes and decide how the city's doing, where we are budgeting wise, I think is imperative, because people don't have hours and hours to pour over this information. Because in a perfect world, you're gonna be looking at this monthly. So, and if I took too much time, I apologize, but just wanted to get that out there.
Will you be able to share your write-up with us, or how does it work at this point? Will you share?
Yeah, I could share everything. I mean, there's more here, but I kind of just wanted to focus on the most important things, and it was
Thank you
round up
very
against
much,
my
Frank.
time.
Thank you very much. The updated council checklist was included in the packet for tonight. I will not read those items. We've gone over that checklist often enough. Instead, I'm going to give the committee members and council members present here tonight the opportunity to share their thoughts and concerns about the 2024 end-of-year financial statements and the 2025 12-month appropriations budget, also known as Ordinance 11, 2025. Each of us will get 10 minutes. As chair, I'm going to speak first. Thank you to the mayor, to the finance directors, and Hairston and Felds for all the information that you've shared with council. I appreciate all the work, but I am disappointed that we never received just a revised 2025 budget book by department for expenditures and then all the city's revenues, expenses projected for 2025. We do have this information and all the separate reports from the mayor, but it's been challenging, as Frank said, because the information is not consolidated. I am disappointed that the 2023 audit is not completed and shared with council yet. It's my understanding the state auditor is still waiting for some documents. Cleveland Heights has missed 4 deadlines since May of 24. This audit's long overdue and should be shared with council as soon as possible. And the 2024 unaudited reports will soon be due to the auditor as well. Consequently, I'll be asking Director Hairston for monthly financial statements at monthly finance committee meetings after this budget's approved. I'll be asking for January and February. I'd also like to see the fourth quarter 2024 financial statements that we got posted up on the website, and I'd like the monthly financial statements posted on the website when they become available during the year. I'm going to start asking in June for the unaudited financial statements for 2024 to follow that tracking and make sure they've been sent to the auditor, the city's auditor, and then to the state auditor. Addie and I are going to track all capital requests over $50,000 and ask for updates on those items on a regular basis throughout 2025. I'll be seeking confirmation that all Kane Park invoices for the 2024 season have been paid. I'll be seeking information the following are on the mayor's, and this is where I think that each one of us will be coming forward with any additional capital requests during a moment to speak. Confirmation the splash pad at Denison will be installed in 2025. Confirmation that the $216,397 for the ambulance reach has been encumbered for 2025. Confirmation that the ARPA ask from Coventry Village, which was removed from ARPA funding, will be completed in 2025. They asked for curb extensions and traffic calming to keep pedestrians and bike riders safe. Confirmation that chairs will be replaced in council chambers and executive council room. These are all dirty, they're broken down, and they're not comfortable for residents attending our meetings or for council and administration who attend so many long meetings in these rooms. Additionally, here are my capital requests for 2025. Mayor and I spoke briefly, but I'm going to keep tracking it, Mayor, if it's all right with you. The $1 million that we think that we could use for the refuse transfer station that you said you'd work on with Director Klingscale and that perhaps present to council. And also I am asking for $38,160 for pilot composting program with 2 drop sites, one north and one south in the city. Lastly, I'd like a commitment, again from Frank's position as well, from Director Hairston and Mayor Sarin, that the finance department software will be evaluated. And if it needs replacement, the council be asked for either an amendment to the 2025 budget or to purchase new software, or that purchase will be on the 2026 budget. I think it must take a lot of staff time to try to work around all these reports and even entering daily entries. So it's really been a concern of mine for quite a few years. These are requests from Vice President Russell. She would like a commitment from Director Zamp that $250,000 of the budget for consultants for planning and development be committed for zoning changes needed for tiny homes. She was concerned because it didn't seem to be clearly delineated. Vice President Russell has also asked that funds be allocated for constructing a dog park. And per an email from Mayor Sarin, this project is still in the development phase and requires more public engagement and administrative planning time. So that's where I'm at the moment, and I'm going to give the floor next to Councilor Maddox.
Thank you. Don't have much to offer in terms of this budget process. I'm hoping that the council that was originally feeling uncomfortable with this has enough information now to be able to move forward with that information. I do want to commend you that this was a marathon to go through these meetings, to get this information and gather to keep everything on track. And so I do want to appreciate you for the work that you've done. I'm hoping we're at a place tonight where we can get this passed. And my goal, again, is to separate any other additional questions we have out from making sure that we get a full year's budget passed to operate and run this city. Any additional questions that we have in terms of finances, in terms of any other projects, absolutely, I would like to see those answered if there's any confusion. But I don't want to conflate that with this. I want to make sure that we get this approved and that we have the information that is necessary to get this budget passed. I want to thank the administration for working through this. Again, you walked into a certain set of circumstances you've been working through over the last several years, staffing issues, systemic issues. And so I appreciate the work that you've done and the patience, not just for the folks in this room, but for the directors and the support staff that got us to this point. This has been a lot as we've been dealing with this since the end of last year. And so I'm encouraged just based on the information that we have, the information that's available for the public on the website, and even what was stated here today, that we have enough information to go ahead and pass a full year's budget and then make some adjustments going forward so that this process doesn't happen again this way. So that any adjustments we need to make this year as we're heading into the fall are made. But my goal is to really, again, get this passed. And again, anyone who has any major projects or any capital projects, looking forward to hearing those outstanding projects. But just based on the information that I've gotten from the administration, I'm continue to be comfortable with voting on a full budget and those capital projects, understanding that there's going to be some adjustments throughout the year and that some available grants or some grants that we thought may be available may cause some shift in this budget just based on some of the things that are happening at the federal level. But I'm looking forward to passing this budget and getting forward. And looking at this, I really want to spend some time, and I appreciate some of the things that you stated, just building in systems and processes to ensure that we can spend more time talking about the future and those projects than this information. So thank you. But I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right, thank you very much. Counselor Posh.
Sorry to do this to you guys. I sometimes think the PowerPoints, and regrettably, I don't have enough for everybody. I have enough council members, the mayor. I'll make this available to anybody publicly or online. There's much more stuff here that I'm not gonna go over tonight because we just don't have time. And regrettably, because all of us in this room wear about 100 different hats, this is still, that's it. This is still a work in progress. And I think that's the only mistake I found. Okay, so full screen.
Just go to slideshow.
All the way at the top left.
Yep, top left, first icon. Keep going, right there.
You guys are good.
Okay, so I've just kind of highlighted a couple things here, just so we can kind of go through this quickly. Yeah, I still feel like we're missing information. There's things in a normal budget book that the city has had, like with capital expenses that shows grants and other funding sources. This is stuff that we don't have. The biggest issue I have is I don't think we haven't had enough information until I feel like a week ago to have any kind of meaningful dialogue. And we've been at this for 2 months. We didn't get the complete financials until February 25th. The 2023 financials still remain unaudited by the state because we haven't been able to get the information to them. And I think that is a transparency problem, and it's something that we have to solve. I don't think we really knew until January's the full extent of the finance department's having the problems that it has. I will tell you, our new director, I have a lot of confidence in Director Harrison. I believe he's kind of inherited a difficult situation. Mr. Feltz, your work is so darn appreciated. And, the mayor has been doing the budgeting work. I mean, that's pretty clear from what we've heard when I've talked to Frank. And, it is my opinion that we need a qualified municipal fiscal officer doing budget stuff, who works for the mayor, and gets direction from the mayor. But having the mayor do that kind of work, I just don't think can be done, but I realize we probably don't have any other choice. Some of these slides aren't presenting correctly, some of my little highlighting. A little surprised to find the version of the budget we got in 1230 cut some funding to the finance department. And the numbers that we get from council, just keep on changing. When you sort of look at the 2024 actuals versus 2025 actuals, the ending balances between 1 month and another was 15 million for the fund balance in March and 21 million on the amount of money we have left over between March 2025 and February 2025. I mean, these are big swings and we're under an immense amount of pressure to try to pass a budget, but the information hasn't been correct until now, I believe. So I'm concerned about the accuracy information. I'm concerned about the estimates. This is just an example with healthcare. I mean, basically, if you look at the actual healthcare line item, that we spent 7.9 million last year, and we're budgeting only 8.1 million this year. We've got more employees. We have 50 unfilled positions. What happens if we fill some of those positions? And normally there's an increase in healthcare costs somewhere between 8 and 10% a year. It just doesn't seem reflective in this budget. I mean, Frank mentioned earlier that a typical budget would be a fully funded budget. I mean, your staff is fully funded, and then you usually have some money left over if it's never fully funded. But this healthcare number, I think, is low to begin with, and it certainly doesn't have enough money in it, I believe, to be realistic. Some sewage disposal questions I asked. Bottom line, we had a savings in our budget last year. This is relatively good news. I guess depends on how you look at it. We had a projected total fund balance in our budget last year of $52 million. We have a healthy amount of money in this city, even now. That's what was budgeted, 52 million. The end of the year fund balance was 70 million. So we had more money left over last year in our budget. And it makes sense because we know a lot of the capital budgets hadn't been started. And we know we've got 50 open positions. Is this a good thing or is it a lost opportunity? It's my opinion that the budget is your roadmap. You get your budget done. You spend all your time and resources. You make sure everything that's in the budget gets done by the end of the year. And it doesn't look like that happened last year because we have a lot of money left over. The good news is that money is left over for this year that can be used. I think we talked about the red flags, timely information, financial transparency. Where is the audited financial statements for 2023? This has been highly politicized. I'm not going to walk down that path right now because I want to try to be productive and move forward. I have some ideas on how we can move forward. I think we do have to assume that the numbers that we received to date are accurate. We have no other choice. We have to make a decision by the end of this month.
Can you just look them over?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you saying that the numbers are accurate? You've looked them over, but would you go on? Would you stand on the end of that limb?
I have done no procedures to verify the numbers that we've been given. We've done no auditing work. You're not going to do an audit in this short a time frame, and so I'm in the same boat you guys are as far as taking reliance that the numbers that have been provided are good. So.
I am moving forward with the assumption that the numbers that we just got recently are good and they're fast. we've got good people sitting at the table, I feel like I need to go with that assumption. So I want to pass a budget. I don't want to hold up a budget because maybe the information is incorrect. But I mean, I think there's things that we can do if we keep a watchful eye on the budget and ensure that the numbers are correct, kind of on a metered basis, like monthly financial statements, this kind of thing. So I kind of have a plan that I'd like to present to you folks. That basically involves basically 6 areas. So let's start with the
2 minutes left, Jim.
Let's start with the 2023 and 2024 audited financial statements. I think we need to put a line in the sand and say we need 2023 financial statements available to us mid-year. I have a date in here. I also think we need to make sure that we get the information for 2024 to the state on time. And we need to have information. We need to have presentations, regular presentations from the finance department that actually show us as such. I think council needs to retain CUNY as its advisor in this process just to help us navigate that and make sure we're getting the information that we should be getting. Financial department operations, I think we need to increase the budget of the finance department. I feel like we need to add an assistant director. I think we need to set some departmental goals. We all know we have people in the city that talk to us offline. One thing I've heard over and over and over and over again is that the city work can't get done because there's bottlenecks in the finance department. And I think we need to set some goals in order to get that done or get some reassurances that those are going to be done. I think we need to replace the antiquated accounting system and financial system. That's going to make everybody's life a lot easier to get reports out. And I think we as council need to fund that. And I think we need to get monthly financials presented to council or council committee, but I think we need to set that process in place. And I kind of think that is something I want to hear that's going to happen before I say yes on this budget. I also think that we need to get quarterly capital project updates from the departments. Quarterly, 1 page on a spreadsheet. These are the 10 projects I'm working on, or these are the 20 projects I'm working on. Are you going to cut me off right now? If I'm over my time, I'm over my time.
Yeah, 1 more minute.
But I think we need, if we're funding these things, we need to know the statuses of them. That's something I want to see that I want to make sure that we get. I want to see legislation lowered so all the approvals that are over $25,000 have to be approved by council. So I want to change the 50,000 number to 25,000. I think all fiscal legislation must be made available to council 24 hours in advance with a narrative memo with schedules from our financial officer detailing the purpose and impact of such transactions. This is going to build trust. It's going to build transparency. It's going to keep us from fighting. It's a huge issue that has to be solved, and it's a best practice. And I think we need monthly reporting detailing the open positions. I've got a listing of capital items, but if you'd like to, I'm over my time and.
Well, hopefully at the end, when we talk about capital budget requests for council, then you can bring them in. Does that work for you? Thank you. President Kuda.
Yeah, I think everybody's worked really hard. I think we all know how we got here. You know, we know everybody had the same experience in November and December as we tried to pass a budget. And I want to start with a question for Frank Ike, and then I would also like to at least have a short discussion about the capital items and the 15 new positions? 16 new positions. If only to say that everybody, are we okay with all this?
Okay.
I don't think we need to go line by line. Frank, what I wanted to ask you was, you said, we should be able to produce the finance department should be able to produce a 1-pager for council that we could read in 20 minutes. Let me ask the question. Don't worry, I'm not trying to, that's not the part of it that I want to ask you about. What I want to ask you is, does our present system, as you understand it, is that system able to produce it, or is the only way we could produce, because you basically said that we've gotten a lot of fragmented information, piecemeal, right? And that format doesn't really work for a council that needs information formatted in a more succinct way. Okay, so I got that, and I think everybody's all for the more succinct way. But I'm asking, is there any way to do it the way, given what we have now, or do we actually have to change our system to do that?
I don't know. I don't know your system well enough to know whether that's a possibility or not. I know that some of the reports that we attempted to run, like we tried to run an open purchase order report. And Mr. Phelps, would it take a half an hour for it to just run?
Yeah, I think it's more like 25, but yeah, close.
And then it ended up being a huge report. So
Wait until you have to then manipulate the data in Excel, create the headers in order to.
and that was
Yeah.
that's the thing. It seemed like a lot of the reports that were coming out were robust, but like that's not what you want when you're trying. And I think ultimately what council, and this is something that, I think we don't have to figure out tonight, but what is the information that council would want to see? That's what ultimately needs to be decided. What is the important information that you'd want to see to figure out, and then determining how can that be generated out of the system?
Well, last year, we got a budget book, I'm talking about 2023 for 2024, and it was in a format that, I don't know, I just speak for myself. I understood the budget book, and the individual budgets were in a format that I understood, and I assume it was used with the system. But could we go to Feltz and Hairston here on this, on the same question? Could more succinct reports be generated with the system we have now?
The system that you have now, in my opinion, is antiquated and inefficient. And I've only had 5 weeks of experience with it. And it takes reports a long time to run, and then when you get them, sometimes they're 315 pages. It doesn't. You should be able to push a button and get an income statement and balance sheet, and it tells you your financial position.
Right.
You should in 2024 you should be able to get that in a couple minutes.
And the system doesn't do it.
Our system doesn't do that.
Our systems don't tie. I've never worked with a system where the reports don't tie. If the reports ties, we are a lot more efficient because we don't have to go in and manually put things together. And when they told me, Ike was there when we called and asked questions, and we need this from the experts and support. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. It's just rambling.
And they're the ones that created the software.
And I've never worked with a system where the reports don't tie. Never. I've never worked with a system I can't get a trend report.
And I know the question was for them, but I did have a little bit of insight as well. And it relates to what Mr. Ike said about having a better understanding. And I know you said what council wants to see. And at the very least, I'd like for us to think about what council and individual council members want to see. And I think that that's important. I also think it's something that we should probably think about. What does council feel it needs to see in order to make an informed decision? Because that's the other thing, like you liked the 2024 budget book. There was information that was requested in this go around that was far beyond anything provided in the 2024 budget book. But if that was satisfactory for council's needs, maybe we can think about this as sort of a one-off because of the particular circumstances, but getting into a rhythm of more regular reporting that makes more sense, and more check-ins between the full council and the administration on these things throughout the year might mean that what council needs to see is not so far over and above. And I'll tell you, my plans for financial reporting and budgeting are expansive. And we haven't had a lot of discussion about this, but my expectations year over year is to do more and more and more, but in a way that the administration can digest in terms of the workload. That was my goal. That's why I started this process in 2022. And so my hope is to provide council with everything it needs to make informed decisions and to have an understanding of the city's financial position, both now and then a realistic projection of the future, you know, knowing that we can't know everything about the future. But I think that sort of this particular go around, I'd hope that, you know, we can treat this sort of as an anomaly because sometimes you're in a storming phase and you need to, you know, rebuild your team, that kind of thing. But I think that there's something to be said for figuring out what council needs. Because again, if the 2024 budget book was
Yeah.
for your purposes, there are things, I mean, you know, some detailed stuff that, again, I think council should get more than we have gotten in the past. You know, when I was on council, more than I've been able to provide thus far to council moving forward. You know, as we go forward, I think that there are some really important changes that I'm gonna be making. But I also don't want to, again, a one pager isn't gonna have every single account listed, you know, every single account classification listed, you know, that's not a possibility.
I'm glad you weighed in on this. And let me say this, the format that Andy Unetic used, you know, he had the comparisons right there, so we didn't have to take 2 sheets of paper. I think what happened this year with this budget was as we got more fragmented information, it created more questions than we would have ever had if it was in a different format. So yes, what you're saying is true. We have, but the reason we asked for more questions.
That's why I was saying, I hope that this is an anomaly and we can
Yeah,
sort of move
yeah.
forward in a smoother way.
I mean, and it's like anything, this is extremely esoteric materials, you know, especially when you dive deep in it. And it's normal, I mean, I'm gonna use that word, to have it create more questions, you know, because the more information you get, it's like, well, wait a minute. And then you're lining stuff up with stuff that you got before that and, you know, trying to reconcile, as Mr. Felt said, and that's the difficult part. But anyway, I'm done. And I would like to have that short conversation about the,
What I'd like to do is to give Councillor
Yeah,
Cobb and
yeah, after.
Petrus their opportunity, and then we'll just take a poll on how each of the council members here feels about the 16 new positions, we'll do yes or no, and then also okay with the capital requests as they are. Does that sound all right?
yeah. And as far as moving forward goes, I'm just gonna follow the committee's lead.
Oh, good.
Okay.
All right, Councillor Cobb.
I won't take 10 minutes. First, because Councilor Russell's not here tonight, you did mention the one item that she also asked me to make sure that we were going to provide for the funding for the consultants for the zoning changes that need to be made. And I'm assuming we can, if we're not going to do it as part of this budget, that we'll have a commitment from council that we'll do it out of the general fund.
I think the way that I read her email to me, it's in the planning and development department,
Yes,
but it's just not clearly identified. I think
Right.
it's a semantic.
and then the other item that she wants to make sure that we're going to address is, and this goes back to our prior ARPA discussions, and that is funding the merchants associations, the startup funds to provide assistance to have merchants associations in Noble Road and Taylor Road. So perhaps, again, that's something that we can pull out of the general fund, put a request for proposals out to someone to be involved in starting those 2 associations up. Again, this all dates back to ARPA.
Because I know I started that conversation back when I was chair of planning and development, but I'm confused about how we got to the point where we would be doing this. I don't recall a robust conversation about it, so I don't know why we would set aside funds on even what that would look like. I guess that's why I'm confused.
Well,
Did it happen in planning and development?
Well, I don't know that we've taken any concrete steps to fund it or get requests for proposals out. And that Ms. Russell just wanted to highlight it. Yes,
It was
it
discussed
has been
Is it
discussed.
discussed like what it would look like how it would, because
No, nothing has been discussed.
Well, what was discussed was, SIDS versus Merchant Association, that kind of thing. And I know we have 1.3 million in a community investment fund that's revenue replacement money that I thought could be used. It seemed like that was in the.
I just for me, spending that kind of money and it had never left out of committee, and I haven't even had an opportunity to speak on it at all, especially when it's a project that I started. I'm very concerned we're at a point where we're talking about doing any type of allocation. So I'm in total disagreement of that until it comes back to committee to hold for further discussion, because I shouldn't have to show up to planning and development to hear about any allocations when we're talking about where this is coming from or how this looks. And I'm extremely committed to that noble area, and the fact that it hasn't come out of that committee that I'm not on at all, and that was a part of something that I touched. I have a problem with the fact that we've been bringing it up and having a conversation here. So if there were conversations in that committee that need to come out, we need to figure out how to get this entire council involved. Because if I was to present something like that in my committee, you all would lose your minds if I just asked you to push something through like this. It sounds like it's already done. And that's my problem. It doesn't leave any room for collaboration. This is the second example where something's been in committee and it's just been an assumption and something was passed. And so the lifeguards are exactly the same way. It was never discussed in committee to hold. It stayed in her committee, and then it was just pushed through because people showed up to that committee. I want this discussed in committee of the whole, and any further discussion about it, it doesn't happen outside of a committee, I think is going to be an issue for me. The public needs to hear this in-depthly, not just from the Planning and Development Committee, but in our entire committee about what this looks like. That changed the entire operation of an entire business district in Noble. And I haven't had a clue what was even happening, and I shouldn't have had to show up to Planning and Development to do that. And so before we move any further, I need clarification on that. So I'd rather wait on Councilwoman Russell to come and kind of explain exactly where she is with this and what this looks like, because I've had no information given to me whatsoever about this. And I shouldn't have had to show up at that Planning and Development Committee to do so.
Nothing, there's no attempt to hide anything. She asked me to bring it up, I'm bringing it up. I'm just reminding council that when we allocated ARPA monies, there was a discussion that we were going to fund whatever was necessary to get merchants associations. And I think there was general consensus from council that we would do that. We've not done anything to move that discussion forward. She just wants, so I'm bringing it and I'm bringing it to our attention.
I think where things are at right now is that the planning department has hired a consultant. This is what I understand. If somebody could tell me differently, that's looking for a plan for, the various neighborhoods. There's no done deal at all, or even an implication of a done deal. There's just a question of, would we need to use, would this come out of the budget, or could it be, or could it come out of the ARPA funds that were set aside for business districts?
All right, moving on to my discussion about the budget itself. I recall that when Director Unetic was here, he discussed the situation with our finance software and how cumbersome and outdated it was. We need to make that a priority this year to allocate whatever money is necessary to bring that finance accounting software into the 21st century. So whatever it requires for council to do, we need to do that. As to the general budget, more specifically the mayor's capital appropriations that he added to from what we originally were given, I'm fine with them. I am satisfied that we have the best numbers that we're going to have. I think this was, although it has been a long process, I think it is a good process that we have gone through, because we have gotten reliable numbers that I don't believe that we had before, and is evidenced by the numerous changes that have occurred from reports that we got in December at the time of the original budget to what we were given now. We have a much better idea and an accurate picture of where the city's finances are and where the fund balances are in each account. That's all I have.
Thank you. Counselor Petrus.
Thank you. I don't have too much more to add beyond what has been shared. Just generally speaking, I think that we all have learned a lot of information since the end of the year. And a lot of us have thought about ways that we might be able to improve the process going forward. In terms of specific information that I've learned, some of my initial concerns were around the cost of the salary adjustments not being in there. We've since learned that. Concerned about the potential Local 860 renegotiation. We learned the total amount of salaries that were covered by that agreement. That was good. I was also concerned about there not being much capital in the budget, and we've since received that. So there's been a lot of good information shared. I'd like to share a couple other things. So I have a monthly recurring meeting with Mayor, and during this month's meeting, which was last week, we discussed the budget. He kindly invited Mr. Feltz and Mr. Hairston to the meeting, and there were a couple pieces of information that I learned in it that I thought would be helpful to share with folks. So one of the other things that I've been talking about are the unfilled positions. So in that meeting, they're able to run a report and determine that last year, because of unfilled positions, we avoided just under $9 million worth of expenses. As a reminder, at the end of the year, we learned that there was about $1.4 million from the unfilled police positions. I think that we weren't sure whether that number included the benefits and overtime, but even if we rounded up to $2 million, beyond that, there's still $7 million worth of expenses that we avoided from unfilled positions. With regard to 2024 capital items, I'm still interested in learning of those that are not being re-requested. Which of those did we complete versus which of those did we not complete and are not requesting money for in 25. So I went through the 24 and 25 requests, compared them, and passed a spreadsheet along to the administration so that they could review that. I'm fine with that being covered at another time outside of this meeting. I also asked about the IRS penalties, and it was suggested that I maybe talk with Director Hanna and then also talk with President Kuda and see if he might be willing to have an executive session during a council meeting where we could learn more about that situation. Finally, the software, we talked about the software. I started by asking, well, in my day job, as many people know, I work in IT, and there have been times whenever we've brought in a consultant who will, maybe for $10,000 or $20,000, listen to the pain points that you have with a system and, maybe identify some improvements that could be made, whether that's building more reports or, maybe some other integration or something like that. And I actually learned that Mr. Feltz did engage a consultant. He engaged a consultant who came down from Michigan to try and better understand the pain points, and it seems like we really have reached the limitations of it. And so I think that it would be appropriate for the administration to set a goal of talking with other municipalities to, as we talked about, to understand what products they're using, what they like about them, what they don't like about them, and also talk with vendors, get some demonstrations so that we can confidently go into 26 with an understanding that we are going to transition to something else and start that, as soon as 26 is here. I think that a whole year to do that sort of evaluation and potential process improvement it seems like reasonable and will make everyone's lives better. I am hopeful that we also in our conversations about 26 talk about a long-term capital plan. That's something that we don't already have that just feels critically important, so that we're not, I don't want to say, lurching from crisis to crisis, but suddenly, we need a new fire truck. We need to come up with $1.1 million for that, so that we have some predictability and understand what we ought to be investing. And as a part of that, as I've talked about recently, increasing funding for street resurfacing. So I think with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next item on here is the ordinance 55, 2025. So I'd like to ask the questions that President Kuda raised and ask each and every one of you, are you comfortable, and I'll go in the same order we just finished. Are you comfortable with adding, it's 16 new positions for this current budget? 16 new positions. Counselor Maddox, are you comfortable with that?
Actually, did you want to say something?
I'm really sorry. There was something else that I remembered from my meeting. Is it okay if I add it? It's on the topic of positions.
Yes, go ahead.
One of the other things that I suggested during the meeting is that with us avoiding $9 million worth of personnel expenses last year, that we consider potentially funding these 16 positions with that money. And I think that there was sort of an agreement that, you know, that might make sense, but that's something that would take thought and consideration before we could like easily do that. But I do think that, you know, it's worth considering.
So we, as the appropriations said right now, it includes the 16 new positions budgeted. Are you saying to take those 16 out of the appropriations and fund them through a different?
One thought is that maybe with us having saved $9 million from unfilled positions last year, that I'm not questioning whether these 16 positions are needed. I'm wondering if maybe they could be funded rather than appropriating more money, if they might be able to be funded using some of the savings so that we consider that.
How does that work though? I mean,
Well-
They can only get you to the first year, but you can't continue to do that over and
Well,
over.
go ahead. I mean, I have something to say about that.
So I think what you're suggesting, don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm sort of doing a check and balance here. So you have 16 positions, they add up to something. You're looking at a certain amount of cuts that would happen in the existing budgets with unfilled positions. Probably not a match for match, because I think some of these positions are high value positions, but you would essentially look for, if those 16 positions are costing us X amount of dollars, you're looking for personnel cost cuts within the existing budgets, which would mean less people.
I think that it might be worth considering if the positions that are open, and granted, it's not easy to judge what positions really are open, because as we talked about the report, it's at a point in time. So if a position is vacant in March, if a position is vacant in March, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be vacant in June. But maybe it's the case that there are some positions that have been vacant for a long period of time that we could maybe consider repurposing for one of these 16 positions. So maybe swap out a long dormant position with one that we know that is needed. As Frank was talking about, personnel expenses, unlike a capital expense that could be just in 1 year, a personnel expense is something that is recurring year after year. And so I don't want us to crowd out our ability to fund maintenance and capital expenses by continuing to increase personnel if we're able to maybe repurpose some of the existing unfilled positions for those needs with the 16 new positions.
President Kudo.
So I'm just trying to follow, I think I understand your logic, but aren't you counting on 16 positions, you know, give or take, not being filled out of the 50 that I understand are budgeted for 2025? I would assume that every unfilled position is budgeted for 2025. I'm talking about current unfilled positions. And you're just saying, well, we could, since we saved $9 million from last year, are these in various funds or are they all in the same fund?
All personnel expenses, so are there instances where personnel expenses are funded in other funds outside of the general fund?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but predominantly they're funded by the general fund. That's my understanding. So
Yeah,
across all of the departments,
okay.
there was $9 million worth.
I know this is silly devil's advocate stuff, but what would happen if all 50 positions ended up being filled, you know, during the year?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that it's worth the administration considering if there are long dormant vacant positions that maybe we don't need. They're saying, okay, there are these 16 positions that we do need. We've learned that there are areas where we have pain points, where we need additional capacity. We need additional firefighters because the run volume has increased. We know that, but maybe there are other places where, there is a long vacant position.
So how
Now,
do we
I am not making a specific proposal because I do not have insight at that level to say, okay, this particular position, it could instead be used for the additional position at the community center. I don't have that level of visibility, but I'm suggesting that the administration consider that as a way to potentially fund them.
You mean consider it before we vote on the budget?
That is something for the administration to decide.
Counselor Maddox?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I think it's too late to consider it now, but you put yourself at risk from a hiring and an HR standpoint. And I'm assuming, and the mayor can tell me if I'm wrong, that any position that he budgeted for, their goal is to fill those. I think they would have eliminated them before they added them. So you do put yourself in a position where if they fill them all, you haven't budgeted for them all now because you built in that savings, which means we'll be right back here trying to make those adjustments or find that funding. I think keeping it the way it is and funding these positions also allows you to have better forecasting going into the future versus saying, okay, this year we funded it this way, but I know I can't do that going forward, so I'm going to have to make those adjustments. So I think from a systemic standpoint, a process standpoint, it's easier to have those positions open, staff for them. That way you don't have to worry about it if you find somebody. For give me an example, I had a specialist position open at an organization and I was running for about 6 months. It got to the point where we didn't think we would ever fill it because it was such a specific role for this person. They needed a specific certification. And so we kept it open. And then we kept it open for another 6 months. So we're talking about a year now. But we continue to have to budget for that because we knew sooner or later we're going to have that person and I have to go back to the board to get this done all over again in this approval. And so in a larger case like this, it can lead to major issues if you are trying to hire for someone that you now you haven't budgeted for because you're planning on some open positions. So the only way I could see something like that working is if the administration was saying that they asked us to approve a budget for positions that they didn't plan on filling. And I don't think that they did that just based on the fact that they reviewed all the positions, worked through with a consultant to kind of see exactly how to label everyone and do some elimination already. But I could be wrong, but I think going backwards would be a little more difficult to do that, but I don't know.
Mayor Sarah?
I can provide a little bit of clarity on that. So the couple different parallel processes going on. One was that salary study, wage and salary study that Archer did, and that was separate from this budgeting process. And the way that the budgeting process goes, we do start with sort of a position budgeting question for directors. The finance director and city administrator worked with directors to work through the position budgeting. That's sort of where we start. That's our baseline. Now, I was not maybe as directly involved in some of these conversations as I became involved in this budgetary conversation a bit toward the end. So I can't speak to the nature of those conversations and how they are reflected in some of this position budgeting, but an additional piece of information about our process here is in the same way that Mr. Hairston is new to this position, and I will be having a conversation with him about how his department is structured and how it should be structured. It's the sort of a similar situation with Director Gonzalez in Parks and Recreation. You've all heard probably ad nauseum at this point about my intention to move public properties and custodial out of Parks and Recreation and back into Public Works. And so that sort of restructuring will have an impact on potentially on staffing needs and staffing levels. The expectation of what our positions are, I think will change. And a lot of that change will happen this year. I don't have a problem having conversations about that with council. That might be appropriately in Administrative Services Committee, having those discussions. But that discussion sort of from the administration's perspective will start in the administration internally, sorting out certain things. And then once we get to a place where things feel a little bit less like quicksand, we can start having those public conversations. So I fully anticipate we might end up in a situation where there are some positions that we currently have open that we might be able to close. From an accounting perspective, you know, we can see what changes in the budget we can make. Some of that from a functional perspective is less important because, you know, okay, I guess, yeah, we can decrease a salary budget in a particular department in August, you know, if we want to. If we're not going to spend the money by the end of the year, decreasing the budget just sort of adds a step if we, you know, need to, or if we determine that, oh, wait, no, yeah, we eliminated that position, but it turns out that the seniors really need another part-time driver, and so we've got this and we can use to do that if needs become apparent. I'm sort of ambivalent about how that process needs to go with council. I mean, council has its own sensitivities and considerations. But I think ultimately the position piece of things is subject to change every single year.
And I think that would be beneficial for us all to accept that it's really, those 16 positions, as far as I'm concerned, are ready to go forward with funding them. And understanding that you're gonna have conversations with your department heads about looking at all those unfilled positions. I would assume that'd be just a product of the administrative evaluation of where we stand with staffing in every place. So if it's okay with you, Councilor Petrus, I'd like to keep it the way it is now. At this late date, we're trying to get this budget moved forward, but yet we've had this discussion. And I think we've all taken note. I've taken note as well.
So what happens to that money exactly? The $9 million that's in the, like, how does that work?
So basically the way that it works, so with the exception of any money that has actually been obligated by the city. So we are obligated to pay a certain amount of money. Let's say we're in a 3-year contract, right? We enter into that contract, we are expected to pay 3 installments, one every year. That money's encumbered. And so that money is not subject to further spending until that contract is canceled or whatever might happen. So with the exception of those monies that are encumbered beyond the year in which they're budgeted, and employees' salaries and personnel does not qualify in that regard. At the end of every year, that budget dies and goes away.
Right.
So we have to then move forward with an all-new budget. Now, for practicality's sake and expediency's sake, the way that we generally start a budget process is starting from sort of a basic baseline, and that's that position budgeting process that the finance director works through with the department directors about sort of where they anticipate, you know, where are we right now in terms of position budgeting? Are these positions still positions that you want to keep open because we want to fill them? Are there any positions that we can get rid of? So on and so forth. They go through that process. And then that process is baked into the budget request for the next year. But it is not, nothing carries over, nothing, you know, in that sense. So it just returns to its respective fund balance at the end of the year.
Councilor Posh, do you have something that you'd like to
I was
comment?
gonna say, if you don't use $9 million, it means you have $9 million more in the bank next year.
Right, but where?
In the bank, in the actual bank.
Yeah, in one of the funds, generally the general fund.
Okay.
So if you don't spend $9 million in personnel costs in the general fund, you have $9 million extra in there, which is sort of what I was showing on one of the slides, which is like there was a lot left money. There was a lot money left over, so there's more money in the funds that you could theoretically spend this year.
Not to belabor this, but is that part of the 27 million unencumbered balance at the end of the year? The 9 million from the people we didn't hire last year.
Oh, so anything that we save, let's say hypothetically we budgeted $1 million for a streetscape, project.
Don't do it.
And then, or we don't do it, or, comes in at 750,000.
Got it.
That 250,000, if we don't spend that, then it just returns to its respective fund balance at the end of the year. If it is not encumbered because we didn't contract for it, we budgeted for it, but when that budget dies, if that money is not encumbered, it is in the unencumbered fund balance.
That's what I thought.
I'd like to move on to asking about the capital request that the mayor has submitted for 055-2025. Counselor Maddox, what's your viewpoint on the capital request?
I'm supportive.
Okay, Counselor Posh?
I think we need to add some things.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the actual ordinance we're being asked to consider tonight, and we'll talk about our requests after that.
My ask is gonna be to include more items and take some things out of the list.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think that it's appropriate for one council member to say, take X item out of the list and put my item in. But I would like to see a consensus amongst us about the things that we do want added. Then we determine if we just increase the whole capital budget, or do we say, let's keep the capital budget at like $10 million, but please include these items. That's a decision that this committee or the council has to make. You asked a direct question?
No.
I am not going to, I don't want to go over what was already been asked, but I would like to see us swap out some of the things that are on this list with some other things, with some what I feel like are higher priorities.
Would it be acceptable to you to move the ordinance forward to council next week and get this budget approved? And then we make modifications during the year with the questions that you have about things that you are not comfortable with? Or do you want to have that conversation tonight? Do you want to have it in committee of the whole on Monday?
I would like to answer that question after we have a conversation of the additional capital items that we'd like to add.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, is now the time to hear about the additional capital requests?
I think she just wanted to know.
As I said earlier, I'm fine with what the mayor has submitted.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Counselor Petrus?
I mean, I sort of agree with Councilman Posh that it's worth having a discussion about, maybe some of the things might be, good to include. I've talked about increased funding for road resurfacing. I think that maybe there are some things in the capital budget that maybe we could spread over 2 years. That could free up some money. I also think that, there might be some things in there that, some council members might agree something like roads might take a higher priority over. And so I would think that it would be helpful to have a conversation. I think in terms of process, I think that it would be appropriate for us to have that conversation and make potential amendments to the legislation before it's ultimately passed.
Okay, there is a place on the agenda to talk about council's capital requests. So what I'd like to do is address ordinance 055-2025 at this point.
1-1, sorry.
Oh,
Maybe
1-1.
appropriations. It's 1-1.
I got too many fives in there, you know that. Thank you. So I'd like to ask the committee members, starting with Vice Chair Maddox, are you ready to move this ordinance 11-2025 out of committee to council?
Absolutely.
Posh? Counselor Posh?
I go back to what our accountant has basically said, which is I need to see how it all tracks back. So in concept, if that ordinance is exactly the correct, matches the correct last budget that we received, if that all tracks back perfectly, I'm okay moving it forward.
Okay, how do we get the answer to that, Frank?
The administration should, there should be something that should reconcile the department budgets to the appropriations ordinance. You had to prepare both, so there's gotta be some schedule that would show where that information's coming from.
So I can try to work through this. This is gonna take a while. Would you like to start that process? I can grab the mouse and the keyboard and we can start going line by line through the budget ordinance exhibit and
That makes more sense. Rather, because we've already been here an hour and 15 minutes and we have some more on the agenda, I would like to take Counselor Maddox's suggestion and when, not tonight, right now at this moment in time, but I am in favor of moving it out of committee. So that makes two of us with the caveat that perhaps we can get that answer to Counselor Posh by next Monday.
So the reason why would probably take a while. So we've got, actually, if I could.
Yeah.
So our appropriations ordinance and the appropriations ordinances of cities generally has an exhibit that looks like so. And it's, relatively detailed, I suppose, right? We've broken up by fund, general fund, 101 is where we start. And then the department. So first one is 1101, that's city council. And then we do it, we say by object, but I call this account classifications. And so city council has this total budget for the year, and it's broken up in two ways in the appropriations ordinance, personal services and other than personal services, because council doesn't have any capital expenditures. We are not budgeting for council transferring out, and that sort of thing. Similar situation with the mayor's office, personal services, other than personal services. These departments are relatively simple because they're funded out of one fund, the general fund. Other departments are not quite as simple because they are funded out of multiple funds. And what we think of as departments, the operating departments, can be funded out of multiple funds and multiple budgeting or accounting departments. So what we would have to do basically is pull up some information out of our system that will show the detail for each of these funds and accounting departments, and you guys can take a look at all of the detailed information. I feel like we might have sent that already through some of the budget worksheets, because at the very least, even though 2024, for instance, the budget worksheet doesn't tie to the expense ledger, 2025 is right now just a budget and a budget ordinance, not actuals. So, that has been sent to council in that detail. I'm not entirely sure how we can look at it a different way that would be more detailed than that. Were you talking about the operating departments in particular? Because the only other thing that I can think to do is maybe send you what we already showed you, except, provide an other category that would include things like Department 2106, which is our Civil Service Commission, which does not appear in our department breakdowns because they are not one of our major operating departments. It's a board, but it's got a budget. Landmark Commission, same situation. It's got a budget, but I'm not including that in our planning, neighborhoods and development budget because it is a separate entity and it is not specific to the operations of that department. So that's not how I broke it down. again, I created those departmental breakdowns so that you could see the specific operations of those departments. The rest of the information, that detailed information, I think has been provided through the budget worksheets, the detailed budget worksheets that have been provided, the expense budget worksheets that have been provided. Yeah,
So, and look, this is what I'm talking about. Like you provided this operating department expense comparison.
right.
It breaks down budget, actual, actual. So I want to figure out where Public Works has $24.16 million of budget expense. What can I look at in this appropriations to track that amount down? Where is it being allocated? What funds is it hitting? And ultimately, so here's something that I've put together that document in an Excel file. Earlier today, I reconciled either police or fire to the dollar by using your department numbers. I was able, police and fire are easy. I don't know what goes into Public Works. I don't know what goes into some of these other things. So even if you just provided me the information of what goes into the detail, making up some of these, it would help me just to be able to see where this stuff is going.
Okay, well, so this is the detail, right? This is the budget worksheet. And so again, we're going to inside baseball. I did create this particular column in order to show what the operating departments were. And then we've got this. This is not, by the way, the most up-to-date version, FYI, the up-to-date version. I've made a little bit of changes just for my own, not curiosity exactly, but just
Utility, right?
yeah. So this blanks right now is what I have selected in this filter. And so this shows all of the items that are in the budget but are not specific to a department. And, so we got
That's what I've been asking for.
salaries for the Civil Service Commission is in here, I don't, did we not send this to you?
I don't believe we have just PDF copy of the operating department expense comparison, which Mr. Phelps had mentioned that you had this master budget worksheet, because when we were asking questions, he's like, we just had this worksheet.
There it is.
Well,
There it is. So this would be great to have because we could drill down then and figure that stuff out.
It's partially useful, and that's the thing, because the budget worksheet doesn't tie for 2024. 2023 it might,
Right, yeah, you said the
Right,
expenses
yeah.
are tied.
but 2024 doesn't tie. And we have to investigate exactly why 23 does and 24 doesn't. But yeah, so this is the pivot that I made from that data. And I'm pulling this up now sort of for illustrative purposes, not for, precision purposes here. If I wanted to, I suppose I could go back into this, and I think I did create in the more up-to-date version an other category, so I could throw it into the pivot a little bit easier. But, so all of this other, I wonder, maybe I can throw it in the pivot. I don't think I have a filter.
Would that help you, Frank? You get to that tie-in.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately, and this is not something we may have to worry about right now. I guess it's up to each council person what they think. But the idea that we are only going to focus on these main departments, to me, yes, these are the most significant departments, but I feel like ultimately, when we're having discussions and this is what's provided, we should have an other or a catch-all, kind of like what you're talking about, where it's like, hey, this is everything else that doesn't have a specific department where we're going to put it in, and we're going to have that laid out here because it's significant. And so I think it's something that needs to be looked at and attention paid to it.
Yeah, so the total
You put a
here-
line item then, you put it by line item detail within that bucket?
I mean, I would just do it the same way these are, broken down between capital, personnel, but just, hey, this is a catch-all for everything. But then the
Well,
bottom
but-
line
but-
number
but
would
that's
tie to the
thing.
appropriation.
If we did that, and that's fine, I got no problem like sending over other as well. But again, this is one of those situations where as President Kuda mentioned, I send over this $17,613,000 in, you know, this other category. And is that gonna, I mean, depending on the mood, I suppose, and the context, you know, what kind of questions does that bring up? Then we have to spend a great deal of time. I could just send you the budget worksheet. You know what I mean? Like, just take a look at the budget work, I mean, the expense worksheet, I'm pretty sure we've sent you expense work, not you necessarily in particular. But generally, we've made those budget worksheets available on a couple different occasions, I believe, throughout this process. But this, like this pivot, you know, if we're talking about some of these things, it's just not, you know,
I get it, but
you see what I'm saying? I'm fine providing the worksheet. I can send it over to you now, but I mean, I would run a new one and just send it over.
yeah, I guess just to make this very simple, you know, if I ordered a pie and I got the pie and a quarter of it was missing, I'd probably raise my hand and say, hey, where'd the rest of this pie go? And I'm like, well, you didn't need to worry about that. I guess that's the whole thing. As a person who's a numbers guy, I want the numbers to ultimately tie. I completely understand. Look, there's a paralysis by analysis. So the more information you can give sometimes, the worse off it can be. But I think in a summarized format, like what this budget document is, you can then explain, like, look, here's some of the key, you know, maybe we're gonna identify any department that has over, I don't know, 500,000 in it as a starting point, just say this is what's in there. I completely understand you can't, again, it's the whole thing. We don't want a 68-page document breaking down everything because then you kind of lose sight of, kind of lose the forest through the trees type thing. But to go from here to the appropriations, for me personally, it's just like, well, where's the rest of it? Like, what is making up the rest of this? And then also just being able to identify what is fire and where is it being funded through. I believe this would have that information because it looks like it probably does not. I'm not studying it, but you know, this is kind of what I guess I was kind of looking for to go from here to the next step, which is the appropriations ordinance. So yeah, I believe this is kind of what I'm looking for.
All right, this has at least one shortfall, and that is if it wasn't budgeted, it won't tie.
But I'm even just looking to tie the 2025 budget
Okay,
to
that would
the
tie.
appropriations.
The 2025 budget
Yeah.
ties, yeah.
No, I get that it has its limitations, but just from what I'm trying to do is a reconciliation going from these things that we've talked about into the appropriations, this is what I believe would have that.
And that's sort of the situation here is that when we send over the budget worksheet, that's the underlying data. That's the underlying data that we use to then produce something that lets you know, how much planning, neighborhoods, and development is actually going to be doing to operate their department.
Yep.
But again, I maintain in the same way that this has been done over the last couple of years and before that, the departmental breakdowns are not intended to provide that look into the entire organization. They are intended for a specific purpose. If we want to do something else, then we should do something else. But then I need to know what it is that you need in order to understand what that something else could potentially be. Because again, I don't think you want us breaking down a page in a budget book for the Civil Service Commission and every other board that spends any money or, our flexible savings account. You know, those sorts of things that you do, I don't think that, and I wouldn't be willing to put a page in the budget book for the flexible spending account. I'm not interested in that. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's a waste of our time and yours.
Okay, so for me, it's really important all this stuff ties together. Okay. Now, whether it's gonna add up perfectly in time for us to vote for this, I'm willing to sort of take a step back and say, I trust these numbers because they're given to us by the mayor, and we need to get better at doing this, and we're gonna get you something that ties together, both for this budget and in the future. You know, I'm looking at this agenda, I'm looking at the open status of items. Right under the clean budget book, there is a highlighted item that says schedules for individual funds not specific to a single department. That is something that we've asked for. And I would tell you, if we can just get the total of that, get the total of these, and if it ties, that kind of meets the standard that I'm looking for. But the more and more I hear about things like don't tie and we're doing this on a spreadsheet, you know, I'm gonna ask more questions because I am getting kind of concerned as someone that, I'm the kind of budget person that I wanna see the stuff tied together. I think it has to tie together.
If Frank can produce something based on the mayor sending him this worksheet that gives with a bucket for other that ties.
That'd be great.
I've already created that. I think and I had to open a read only because I think I have it open on a different computer somewhere. You know, like I said, I don't mind sending that over to you, Frank. Take a look. But I did want to point out, like at the bottom here, we've got a grand total. And this column here, column B, is 2025 fiscal year budget. At a grand total of 105,78,576. Which is the number at the bottom of the appropriations ordinance, right? Now, obviously, I don't necessarily expect that, and maybe you do. Maybe everybody should learn how to do the pivot tables. We can just feed you the budget worksheet and you can, do a pivot table. I'm fine with that. I got no problem with that. Pivot tables are actually really convenient to use. I would like to proselytize for them and advocate for their use. And council can take a look at the appropriations ordinance exhibit is done in this way for legislative expediency, really. That's how these things are done. It is not intended to have the granular detail that Frank, I would say maybe this council wants or needs. It's probably designed this way because most councils don't. And sort of are taking more of a 30,000 instead of a 2,000 foot view. Like I said, maybe this year's an anomaly and we can sort of get back to sort of a higher level of oversight instead of a lower level of supervision. But in this case, this is, how the budget ordinance, the appropriations ordinance has been done. Maybe we do it differently. I'm not sure, again, thinking about sort of papering you guys with a bunch of detail that won't necessarily be meaningful is going to be helpful to actually educating about what we're asking. But like I said, this ties. The 2025 budget ordinance and what's in our system ties. The budget worksheet for 2025 fiscal year budget and what we have in the ordinance ties. So that's a commitment from me to you. Again, I will send Mr. Ike the budget worksheet. I'll send it to you with the pivot already created so you can go in there and have fun with that.
Perfect.
And go from there. I mean, I don't know what else.
I think this is it. just, yeah, I mean, send me the information. This is, I think this is gonna answer the question, so I don't think you have to do anything
Yeah.
extra or crazy or.
I will say though, this is based on the budget worksheet, so again, caveat, the comparisons for 2024 at the very least, now 23 is a different story, but for 2024, I think it's what, 700,000 or something like that?
The last time I ran it was like 650.
650, okay.
But I can help you do that, get it, so that it's,
I don't think that it's necessarily worth sort of importing the budget performance report into. We can, I suppose, but I'm not sure it really tells the story about 2025.
I know him. It'll answer his questions without calling
Having to ask.
us, yeah.
Okay.
Cause
All right.
he can see it 22, 23, 24, and 25.
Yeah.
So he can see the flow. It's all in one statement and it ties.
And that's the thing, like thinking about that other, this might be useful for you in answering some of your clients' questions about things like hospitalization. We're looking at a total increase of $1 million in hospitalization. Still an increase over, what we spent, but also a little bit more reasonable than what was anticipated.
So I'm gonna move this along.
Sure,
So we are in agreement that you will provide, Mayor will provide information to,
I'll send over the budget worksheet.
thank you very
Yeah.
much. And then
Thank you.
perhaps we can have this by Monday?
Oh,
Or is that
well,
asking too
I
much?
mean, I suppose if we're gonna include the,
We can do it though.
oh yeah. And I think definitely by Monday, but can we get it to them a little earlier so Mr. Ide can have a little bit of time to toy around with it maybe?
No, I was talking about him getting it back to us by Monday, so that would be including, hopefully you could get
Yeah.
this worksheet to him as soon as you can.
Yeah, we can do that.
So we'll do 2024 basically. Let's just do 23, 24, and then 2025.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Thank you.
So Counselor Maddox is in agreement to move the ordinance 11/2025 forward out of committee. I am in agreement to move it forward. Counselor Posh.
I'm in agreement.
All right, so we move it forward to committee of the whole for Monday. I'm gonna move on to the item that's been on agenda for a while, the ordinance 270-2024, where Mayor Sarin has shared the transfer documentation for 2024 year-end entries that zeroed out negative fund balances. That documentation is attached to this meeting's packet, and the total move from the general fund 101 unencumbered balance for the document the mayor provided was $5,494,437. Finally, we have requests, and I'd like to have input from President Kuda on how you want to handle this, because we did this last year. Council added some things to the capital request budget. And Addie, did you get a chance to look to find that legislation or see what it looks like?
I did not. I think it was just an amendment to the legislation
To
itself.
the appropriations
Yeah.
legislation? So we put numbers in that?
I believe so. But I can double check again.
Yeah.
I'll try to find it.
We just need the law department to be able to say they could do whatever it is we wanna do at
Okay,
committee of the whole.
okay.
I mean, we have to make that decision. Well, we don't have to technically, but we should make that decision in committee of the whole. I mean, we could do it, somebody could raise their hand and create an amendment, during
Okay.
discussion, but I'd rather,
Well, also keep in mind that you guys could always do an adjustment at a later date. You guys can always add stuff.
That's true.
Just throwing that out there.
That's true. We don't have to do them together. If we needed to flesh something out, discuss it.
Yeah, the only thing is my personal ask has been on hold for a while with the compost project, so
And
I would hope that we could have add some that we have documentation for.
my other concern is I know Councilman Posh doesn't just want to add, he wants to take a look at swapping
Yeah.
out. And so I think that's part of, I don't know if there were any other council members who looked at it that way as well. Was there anyone else who was looking to remove or just add or anything like that? Because that would change the nature of the conversation and how we go about that.
I mean, I'd have to hear what it is. I don't know what it is. I mean, conceptually, I'm open to I mean, that's just me, I'm open to any council person's additions or subtractions in the budget. I mean, I think we kind of all owe it to each other.
Do you have time on the agenda for Monday, or do we need to have
Well-
that discussion here?
I did start committee of the whole at 5:30,
Uh-huh.
you know, so hopefully, but we got a lot of other stuff too, but
Is there some way, is anybody else looking at questioning some of the capital requests?
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, cause if not, it makes it easy.
There are none that I'm proposing that we remove.
Okay.
If someone else, like Councilman Kuda said,
Right.
if someone else makes a proposal, I'll consider it.
including
I mean,
yours.
I think that personally, I think that there are certain things that I think probably could be purchased over a couple years so that we don't have to, incur the entire cost this year, but I'm not making any specific proposals on that.
Can I ask maybe if we could just run through a list of the things that Councilman Posh has that he would want to remove from the capital request?
Sounds like we might be able to do that, yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to start this conversation on a negative. I mean, I really don't want to, I'm going to answer your question. I don't want to remove things. I want to make sure that we are doing things, and we're doing things without overspending. There's some little things that are on my list that can be added. It's like a $40,000 survey, okay? And another like $20,000 survey to look at the years, and a $40,000 survey to continue the resident satisfaction survey, because
Those
we're
might
starting
not
to
be
get really
capital
big.
items. I don't think that those are capital items. Just those in particular, I just wanted to.
They would be part of council's budget, an increase in council's budget. But the big capital item is the roads. That is, because I think there's so much more additional money that we have to put into our roads. I heard that you've done some analysis. I've done some analysis too, looking at square footage. I've compared the spend that other cities are spending on their roads. We seem to be on the very, very low end of making investment in road surfacing. And I think we need to increase that amount of money. And I will tell you, I'd be happy if we doubled it. So that puts another couple $1 million. It costs a couple $1 million to do that.
President Kudo?
So the mayor and I talked briefly about this today. There in 201, there's $4-something million, from last year. So to me, it's only a matter of capacity. Could we do more? Because the money is there. It's in the fund. It's in the street resurfacing fund, left over from last year. Even if you take out, what is it, 2.3? What's this year's?
2.3.
2.3, if you take that out, you still got $2 million left over in that street resurfacing fund from last year. Directors, you can correct me, but it's let's see.
It's
Just saying what
right
the-
now, as of 12/31/24, it's $4,245,392.
Yes.
If I could add one thing, you're also going to get revenue this year from gas tax and
That's right.
registration fees, so it's going to be even higher than $4 million.
Yeah, right. We have a projected revenue as well. You're right.
So I guess that leads to my question. If we kept this, or these capital improvement projects that the mayor has requested and increased those areas, would you feel comfortable with that? Or are you still looking for areas to cut? Because I guess I'm wondering what your threshold is to get a sense of any adjustments that we make.
But do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying we don't have to even increase the budget.
That's what I was,
Yeah,
it's-
I mean, it's,
And that's what I guess that's the question I should have asked is, did you have a number you were looking at?
I would rather I said I doubled. I just said, okay, wait, are you saying the amount of additional monies I would?
Yeah, I
put
was
in the
wondering if
roads?
it was more than the totals he's discussing now, or if it.
I think we need to spend some time on this, okay? And I don't want this to hold up the passage of the budget. So I don't want to be a guardrail, roadblock, whatever you want to call it, regarding this budget. But I would like to be able to see room, and we could make budget adjustments anytime we want to make budget adjustments. I mean, if we all feel comfortable taking, depleting that fund by another $2 million, so now we have another, $4.3 million, and just round numbers here, I would feel a lot better about the roads. I'd feel a lot better about that. Now, I am concerned, we've all received an email from the Director of Public Works stating that she's concerned about her capacity in order to be able to do it. I mean, this is mostly outsourced work. If you need to hire GBT or another management company for, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to manage the projects, we still get more roads. We start getting caught up. But another thing that you see, you can't see in my presentation, but it's this expectation, and it does kind of come down to what you mentioned, Councilman. We need to have a plan of how we're dealing with some of these big budget items, whether they're fire engines, police cars, and funding roads, and this is, we need to have a good 5-year capital plan. This doesn't come from council. This comes from the administration, recommendations from the administration. And this is something that we need to have as a city. So when we walk into a budget process, we know we're putting a sustainable amount of money into our roads. There's some number out there. I mean, I know our roads get measured by a number of different sources. And people know in Public Works exactly what roads need to be done first versus second. There's layers that go in regarding, we're not gonna touch this one because there's sewer work that's gonna go on. But there's a list there someplace. And I think that is something that probably needs to come to a council committee, gets discussed.
Well, actually, we're gonna be, the director is gonna be coming to the next council meeting to at least start a bit of that conversation about the 2025 road program. But there are a variety of other ongoing issues, and some of them are already in the capital requests. So, anytime we do a water line, we're going in the street. Sewer work, generally going in the street.
Complete and green streets consideration?
That's the idea, except I know that I haven't sort of been at these meetings, but the city administrator is a member of the Transportation and Mobility Committee. And I know he's sort of indicated, at the very least, he's let me know that he's sort of had some occasion to provide some insight into what the resurfacing is really doing. It's not sort of a broad re-envisioning of a street necessarily. I think that there are some things that we can include in some of those resurfacings, even when it just comes to striping. But we will be doing, we've got $150,000 requested from Fund 201 for the engineering services for our Safe Streets for All planning and demonstration grant that we would be using in order to include a lot of those traffic calming items into our road program as well, if there's a possibility for that. I know the director sort of provided her perspective on what she believes in light of not just the road work, but all of the contracting that needs to be managed through the department, and sometimes for compliance with other funding source requirements, and those sorts of things. We are adding capacity, and I've been seeking to add capacity to Public Works in the assistant director level. I think we're sort of almost there. We're sort of hopefully in the home stretch on a couple capacity building initiatives in Public Works. But I tend to trust the director's estimation of her ability to get this work started and completed. I don't think that she is ever underestimating her capacity.
Councilor Maddox?
Along with that, I think there are three things that are important for me. Coming from working in public properties, I can tell you, if we don't strategically do this right, take trust in Director Clinkscale's direction as well, because number one, if it's a capacity issue, if she doesn't have that extra support, even bringing in someone else, she still has to oversee them, sit down and do that reporting and that structure with them, so you're still creating that work. So that's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing is, keep in mind, just because you're throwing money at the roads, it doesn't mean that people are going to bid those. We saw what happened specifically with Coventry.
Yeah,
And so just because you schedule something out, I don't want the residents thinking, well, we put this money out here and nothing happened. You're assuming that people are going to pick up these bids and take these contracts, and we know historically that doesn't always happen. Then the third thing is, this is something that Director Clinkscale has shared with us, and I've experienced this working in public properties. Is the worst thing that you can do is throw a bunch of money at these roads. You start doing them only to find out that the county or some other entity also has to go in there. And now you have this project where you have residents feel like they haven't seen their actual street put together in what could have been upwards of the entire summer or so, because we've repaved it because we saw it look, but then find out we got to dig it back up again because of a project. So looking at these projects strategically is part of the bigger issue. We don't want to repave a bad road that we know we're also going to have to tear up again because there's something underneath and it's on that schedule. So I want to caution the council from getting ahead of the people who are really touching and doing this work, because there's much more to it than just budgeting out that work. There's a schedule, the process is finding out what the city of Cleveland is doing, the sewer district is doing, and so many other things in terms of the streetscapes that play into whether or not a street can get done, and if it makes sense to repave that street just to tear it up again. And I've seen that historically happen time and time again. And so I think there's a lot to consider besides just throwing the money in. I agree that we can absolutely, there is a need to do more, but I don't want to overdo our capacity. And I certainly don't want to put our residents in a space where they're seeing something repaved and then torn up again, simply because we wanted to stop the complaints on that street, but knowing that there's a large strategic plan. So anything that we do, I would want to make sure that we're getting that direction directly from the director, because she's seeing not just her capacity for a staff standpoint, her capacity to be able to check up on these projects, but also what else is happening across that board that she knows about that maybe we don't, that other agencies are going to be doing on some of these streets. And then again, keeping in mind that just because you've budgeted for it, it doesn't mean someone's going to pick up and snatch that bid up. And it created quite a bit of frustration on Coventry Road for several years while people were angry, not realizing it was not because we didn't want to do this work, but no one wanted to do that work. And so just keep that in mind, that is a part of that as well.
I think that I'm sorry, I'll call, just a moment.
No, that's fine.
What we have to understand is that all the coordination needs to take place. But if we can have those conversations like you have in your agenda on Monday, and maybe quarterly that Director Clinkscale comes before us and says, well, we didn't get bids on a project. Or this one is we're gonna go in and replace water lines at the same time as we replace something else. The coordination she has to do is just mind-boggling, but I think that we're sitting around the table here this evening and saying, we all wanna spend, if she needs money for a project, then we want to be asked to okay it, because it is extremely important to this infrastructure of the city. Councilor Petrus.
Like I've shared before, in looking at some other cities, it seems like we are not putting enough into our roads. And you really can figure this out just by, if you know the number of miles of roads that you have, the average lifespan for a road, the average cost, you really can figure out about how much you should be putting in each year. It's my understanding, based on a conversation with Mr. Horrigan, that an engineering firm has advised at the city that we should be putting about $6 million a year into the roads. So we are allocating $2.3 million for resurfacing. It is critically important that we have conversations about creating a long-term capital plan, a 5-year capital plan, but I don't think that we should wait until putting that together before allocating money now. I think that it's really important that we put additional $2 million into the road resurfacing. We're already having conversations with other partners like Cleveland Water and others when deciding what 7 or 9 roads we want to do with the 2.3 million. It's easy to then extend that to an additional 7 or 9 roads with an additional $2 million. The roads are in terrible shape. This is something that we hear about all the time from residents. And so I am going to support putting $2 million more in now.
Are you suggesting that we add that to what's unencumbered in Fund 201?
Well, Fund 201 is one place. I think that there are a number of different places they could come from, but I think that in principle, the $2 million is a number that I'm comfortable with, and I think that that we should increase the amount by. If people would like for it to come from 201, I'm fine with that, given that there is plenty of money there. If we would like to consider having some of that come from the general fund, which funded 402, which most of the capital purchases are coming out of, I would be fine with that as well. There are lots of different places that it could come from, but the 2 million I think is a fair and appropriate number, and I think that we should allocate it now.
Councillor Paul, should you have something to contribute?
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the capacity issue, well, first of all, I trust Director Clinkscale to skip over any possible, duplicate, or, I don't know, that's not, where we would have to tear up something. I mean, you just skip over anything that would fall into that category. Go on to the next one. Mayor, if I understand it correctly, there's like AI software that kind of figures out how, the conditions of the roads and, right, do we use that?
So we went through with LiDAR sensing technology throughout the entire city. That went through
Tell us
some
what
sort of
we do now.
algorithmic or AI programming to determine the condition of the roads in a way that the human eye can't necessarily detect in the same unbiased way. In order to develop a baseline data set about the conditions of each of the roads in the city and, work with that so that we're not playing favorites with any part of town or any individual person's street. Nobody's street is gonna get paved because, one of us lives on it or something like that. In order to develop an unbiased idea of the road conditions, and we use that to make our determinations about what streets get resurfaced in addition to other data like, traffic counts and that kind of volume.
Yeah, to me, there's just one issue, and it's capacity.
And this is the thing.
There are no other issues as far as I'm concerned.
I understand, and I this is what I told the director, this is what I told the council president as well. I am loath to tell council no when you want to give us more money for a thing. But in this circumstance, I completely understand and I share the desire to do more road resurfacing and do more in our road program. I know that the director sent you guys an email. I don't know that if I was copied on it or not, but she did tell me what she wanted to tell you guys. It had to do with not just our capacity specifically in the road program or funding in Fund 201 or the CDBG funds that we use for road programming as well. And I think that we should plan for, and I think the director is interested in planning for an expanded road program. I think that it's likely not going to be possible to execute the expansion that some of the council members are advocating for right now based on what the director has said. So that's one concern that I have, but I agree the way that, our roads have been failing throughout the winter, especially this winter. Again, we're seeing more and more freeze thaws. It was 60 degrees today. Maybe we'll have another blizzard next week, who knows? So these are the sorts of things that we need to adapt to. I think what the director is asking for is more runway so that we don't crash. I don't want to create expectations of the director that burn out their department. I know that the actual road work gets, we don't have, the equipment to resurface, Coventry Road, right? We farm that out to companies that we contract with to do the construction work. but there is a whole hell of a lot of work that happens in the department as well, and primarily at this point by the director, which is, you know, why we're looking and have been looking to build capacity for additional capital project support in the department. And I think that we'll be pleased with that, but we're not there. And so I think what she's asking for is give us this, help us plan as we build capacity. We're talking about that sort of the 5-10 year capital planning process. We know we can plan for capital 10 years from now. It's going to change by the time we get there, but it's good to have the plan. And that is where we're trying to get to in sort of building this organization. And we have been building this organization, 2 or 3 steps forward, maybe 1 step back the whole way. But that's what she's asking for, a little bit more runway time to do it planfully. Because just adding $2 million to the annual street surfacing program is not going to mean that we can spend that money. If you want to, maybe it does no harm to add it. You know, you can take it out of 201 and we can put it right back at the end of the year if we can't do it. It doesn't really, in a practical sense, create a harm or anything like that. But I also, I want to be respectful of the director's expertise and her understanding of her department and what it takes to get these road projects up and running.
So we can finish this discussion on Monday? Or, yeah,
With that,
just a second. I want her to know that we are supportive of the work that she does and that we know how important her job is to this whole city. And that what she needs to have that conversation with us, so that's where I'm at. Counselor, you have to go? All right, Counselor Petrus?
On the topic of capacity, of course, that's an important consideration. One of the 16 positions that we are funding is an assistant director to assist with capital projects. And as Councilman Posh noted, another option is to engage a firm to assist with that. Looking at the ARPA funds, for example, we engaged organizations to help us with the distribution of a lot of those funds. So whether it's grants to small businesses or home repair assistance through the Home Repair Resource Center and other things. This is something that we do regularly when we don't have the capacity or skill sets to do it ourselves. And as was noted, if something is not spent, it remains in the account. There's no harm. But I think that we should aim to make a big increase in this. And that's my position on it.
All right, thank you. Counselor Posh?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it's part of our job. I mean, we were told by Dan Horrigan during his interview process that the budget is a roadmap. And figuratively, that's what we're sort of talking about tonight. Okay, it is a roadmap to build roads, at least in this little segment of the conversation. I want to set the expectation. I don't disagree with anything that that the Service Department Director says. I respect everything that she does. But the issue here is we need to find a way to build capacity in order to spend these monies to do more work, to do more road work, okay? And I think what we're doing right now is we're setting a tone, we're setting an expectation that we do need to spend more money on our roads. And this is something that needs to be on some list, someplace that gets taken care of. We need to measure it. I mean, time is of the essence. If you don't do it today, you've lost opportunity. So, I mean, I'd like to support it. I'd like to find a way that this organization can build capacity. I mean, it's $100 million organization. It can find capacity. And we also know that we're down 50 employees. There's things that we can do to repair this and get back up to speed. So I want to, I think we should spend the money, whether it gets spent or not. That's up to the administration.
I don't have a problem with
Wait. I'm sorry. I just need to make sure that I correct a particular record. In this moment, the Director of Public Works has provided information to this council indicating that she believes that it is, that sort of, I think as she phrased it, I think that it is too ambitious to plan a 4 million plus road project this late in the year, even with an additional person. She says, I'm concerned that to plan such an aggressive road program this year would be overly optimistic. So I just want to redirect everybody back to what the Public Works Director communicated directly to council. And I just want to provide a little bit of pushback on the comment that it is up to the administration whether or not the money that gets budgeted gets spent. Sometimes it is not up to the administration. If you gave us $30 million for roads, I can guarantee you we can't spend $30 million for a road resurfacing program in 2025. It would not be up to the administration like we just decided we weren't going to spend the money. So I want to push back on that and just clear that a bit. That's a different question than whether or not we can actually spend the money that council decides to budget toward that particular use.
It goes back to exactly the point that I was trying to raise, is that just because we have budgetary oversight doesn't mean that we're using that budget to drive what's happening in this city. There needs to be some collaboration. We can't decide just because something is important to us and we budgeted that we have an expectation that it's going to get done. I want to make sure, and this is part of, I think, the issues that we've had and the gaps that we've had between communication and understanding between the council and administration, is that there's been a lot of, at least in my opinion, a lot of micromanaging some of these projects without taking into consideration what we're hearing. Director Clinkscale stated this, and we pretty much just said, we don't care, we're gonna budget it anyway, they can figure it out. That is not collaboration. We can't operate that way. When we get PowerPoints and when we come in here and we make these demands, it's really insulting in a way because there's nothing collaborative about it. We come as if we're this oversight committee, as if we're watching over people, and if this doesn't happen, or these are the expectations that I have. I don't talk to other adults that way. I don't come to you and say, these are the expectations I have. We need to change that tone. He is the mayor of the city. We are council. We work together. The way that it's being communicated is quite insulting to me because I keep hearing these conversations as if we are responsible for checking him and what he does and making decisions for how the city operates, and we do not. And I don't like the language that we use in many cases when we're placing these demands. Even the cutting him down from $50,000 to $25,000. That's something you do to a kid, somebody you don't trust. It's things like that. It's a slap in the face when we're dealing with the county that just increased the executive's spending power, even though it's not what he wanted. We're going backwards. So we're going to add more things so that we can continue to micromanage this administration by saying, I don't want you to spend the 50, let's do 25. And now we're telling Director Clinkscale, even though she doesn't have the capacity, she can figure it out. That is not collaboration. Again, we don't budget for compliance. Let's talk about how we can do this together. And we keep talking about these streets and these roads. Let me bring up the fact that this administration and the entire directors sat in this room and were willing to have this conversation weeks before. We're having this conversation now. So it's very hypocritical, though, to come at the administration and make these points and say, I want these projects and we need a 5 and a 10-year plan. When I said that 3 weeks ago, nobody gave a damn. When he stated that and brought us to the table, nobody cared. But now when you say it, all of a sudden it's an emergency and it's serious. It's insulting to me. Again, I just sat here for 30 minutes and we went around this table and talked about the fact that we have jacked up systems, and we all knew it. We all made a decision that we were going to upgrade them. But we're saying it again as if the public doesn't already know, as if it's something that some kind of oversight. They've told us it's jacked up, the reporting is messed up. So let's stop playing games. Let's start collaborating and stop using this inflammatory language of how we're going to approach this. If the Director Clinkscale says that there's a capacity issue, bring it to the table and talk about it. But let's not sit here and say we can figure it out. That is the problem that we have on this council, is that this council thinks that they're supposed to figure out whatever we want to do and that we always know best. That is not true. That's just not true. We are each gifted and talented in certain areas, but we're not seeing at the level he is seeing, and this administration is seeing some of these things, and I need us to take that into consideration. Just because we don't understand doesn't mean something untoward is happening, but stop using this language of how we're pretty much trying to babysit the administration is what it's coming off of, and I don't like it for several reasons, not to mention the fact that he's a black man and it continues to happen. So let's change the tone, because I've watched you all communicate with him differently than you do each other and people outside of this room. And I'm wondering if he was different in this mayor seat, will we be rolling things back and telling these people and the people who report to him that they don't know what they're talking about, and basically we're gonna give you this money and figure it out. If we give him $5 million or $50 million, it isn't his job to figure it out. It's not his strategic plan. It's ours if we're gonna shove this down his throat. So I just wanna make that clear. We've gotta really back up and pull up from some of these conversations that we're having. And let's go back to the collaborative communication that we need to have. Not this if this doesn't happen or this. Let's just push back from that. It's not our responsibility. Let's just have a partnership. But we can't communicate when we're using language like that. It's not our job. It's not our job.
I'm gonna adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.